Now, I do want to warn you that there will be spoilers for The Last Jedi in this video, so if you haven't seen it yet, do yourself a favor and click away now. This will be your one and only warning. And with that out of the way, let me start by saying something that, if you've seen any of my other videos, you've likely heard me say before. Luke Skywalker always has been and always will be my favorite character, not only in Star Wars, but in any story anywhere. As silly as it sounds now as an adult, when I was a kid, I wanted to grow up and be just like him. So 5 years ago, when we first learned that there was going to be a sequel trilogy, the thing that I was most excited about was to see what had happened to my hero. And during the first few years of the wait for the new trilogy, when we had nothing but pure speculation to go on, it never really crossed my mind that they might make it where Luke Skywalker had ultimately failed in his quest to restore the Jedi Order, that they would show him as a broken and defeated man who would essentially run away from the fight against evil to just die. And don't get me wrong here, I knew they'd have to do something with this character and the story in general to make these movies intriguing. I mean, it'd be hard to make a whole new trilogy if everything was going just fine in a galaxy far, far away. But it never really crossed my mind, even after seeing The Force Awakens, that the crux of this whole trilogy would come down to Luke seeing darkness in his nephew, speaking of Ben of course, and that he would, even for a split second, think about taking the easy path and murdering him in his sleep, which sounds oddly similar to something a certain Sith Lord did once upon a time. Because we're talking about Luke Skywalker here, we're talking about the guy who felt conflict in Darth Vader of all people and then ultimately saved him, despite how far down the dark path Vader was, despite the fact that Vader had committed atrocity after atrocity for nearly 25 years, and despite the fact that even Luke's mentors, Yoda and Obi-Wan, seemed to have given up any hope on Anakin ever returning. Because let's not forget that in Return of the Jedi, Luke says to the Force Ghost of Obi-Wan that, "I can't do it, Ben. I can't kill my own father." To which Obi-Wan shrugs and says, "Then the Emperor has already won." Which very much implies to me that Obi-Wan, at the very least, thought the only hope the galaxy had was for Luke to destroy Vader. But that didn't end up being Luke's plan. And he would have enough faith not only in his father to come back to the light, but enough faith in himself to believe he could help facilitate that return. Which now leaves me to wonder, how did someone who believed in Darth Vader give up on his nephew who, as far as we know, was only showing signs of darkness and had committed no evil deeds? Sure, maybe Luke sensed Ben was being consumed by the dark side, but obviously, other than perhaps the faintest speck of light somewhere down deep, Vader was also completely consumed by the darkness. And we know with certainty that there is still light in Ben, that there is still conflict, for even after he becomes Kylo Ren, we hear him admitting that he feels it again, the pull to the light, and that he is being torn apart. So you can't tell me that Luke Skywalker, who, when he was barely trained and not even a full Jedi, felt conflict in Darth Vader, yet, as a fully trained Jedi Master, can't feel it now in Ben. You can't tell me that Luke Skywalker, who once essentially defeated Darth Vader and Darth Sidious, and returned Anakin Skywalker back to the light by not fighting, contemplated and nearly acted on the idea of murdering his nephew as a means of victory. That just doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't make any sense that he could so completely give up on his nephew, no matter what he might sense in him. It doesn't make any sense to destroy everything we believed Luke Skywalker to be. And yeah, I get it. Rian Johnson and anyone else who played a part in the decision-making process of Luke's character in this trilogy wanted to do something unexpected with him. They wanted to add another dynamic layer to this character and explore and answer the question of, what if Luke Skywalker lost faith in himself and the Jedi? But perhaps they forgot to ask the question, would he ever lose faith? Is there anything that could ultimately break him? Because let's not forget, Luke was once lied to by both of his masters about what had happened to his father, blatantly by Obi-Wan and by omission with Yoda. And that when Luke learned the truth, when he found out his father was arguably the worst being, or second worst behind the Emperor, in the entire galaxy, Luke did not break. In fact, I dare say he had his finest moment. Because when offered to rule the galaxy with his father, Luke chose death instead. And yes, I'd have to imagine Luke had no expectations on surviving that fall. And I've always believed it was that act by Luke that ignited a small spark of light back in Darth Vader, and that it was his son who actually initially created the conflict that he would later feel and use to turn him back to the light. Because seeing his son's courage and conviction had to remind him of the man and Jedi he'd once been. Seeing that his son would rather die than become like him had to be a very sobering moment for Darth Vader, or perhaps I should say, for Anakin Skywalker. And that's why it's so disappointing to now see that the man who had once impossibly saved Darth Vader has so completely failed his nephew and then let it destroy him to the point where he decided to give up and run away to die. And you might argue that this all makes Luke more relatable to us, the audience, that breaking him made him feel more human. But the thing is, not all of us break, and thankfully so, or where would humanity be right now? Where would we be if the greatest heroes among us had run away and hidden from their problems and chose a coward's death? I mean, why couldn't Luke Skywalker remain an ideal to strive for? A symbol that reminds us that if we stay true to our principles and believe in our fellow man, that if we choose compassion over anger and don't just take the easy path, that we can rise above and become something more, something better. Wasn't that what the first 6 Star Wars movies tried to teach us? And yes, in the back of our minds, we always knew that Luke Skywalker, and any hero like him, wasn't infallible. We knew even the bravest have their doubts and fears, but it's not succumbing to them that makes them a hero. And by having Luke contemplate and almost commit murder, which is the most despicable act a person can commit, and then having him run away afterwards, well, you've basically turned one of the greatest heroes ever seen on screen into a disgraceful coward. And if you think I'm taking this way too seriously, you might be right, because you could certainly say this is just a movie. But if Star Wars itself proves anything, it's that movies can have great sway and impact in our lives. It's that they can become something far more than just movies. And for a lot of people, myself included, Luke Skywalker had become something far more than just a character in a movie. He had become an ideal to aspire to. And in the real world in which we all live, we already see too many of our heroes fall. It's become all too common to read a headline that lets us know that someone was not who we all thought they were. And the last thing I ever wanted to learn was that Luke Skywalker was not who I thought he was. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. People have been asking me to give my honest thoughts on how Luke was handled in Episode 8, and well, that's what I've just given you. And yes, I do, for the most part, enjoy Episode 8. But I have issues with it, and chief among them is how they handled Luke Skywalker. Anyway, it's now your turn to tell me what you think about how Luke was handled in Episode 8. So leave a comment below, and let's talk some Star Wars, and let's talk some Luke Skywalker in particular. And until next time, thanks for watching.